All right, welcome everyone to episode 53 of APS Radio. My name is Jim Bernica. Today I'm joined by Dr. Alberto Caban Martinez. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jim. I'm really pumped and excited to be with you today.
Well, settle down. It's not going to be that crazy. It's not that type of show. But no, it is going to be fun and I'm excited to have you on here. So if you don't mind, just kind of jump right into how firefighters came on your scope to really begin with and the whole FCI began.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, Jim, but FCI just celebrated like its 10th year as an initiative here with us at the university, and it was really organic. The local firefighters here in South Florida, they came over to our cancer center at the university, and they had health insurance claims data from their union, and they were asking if the number of cases of cancer that they were having with their membership was higher or lower than what you would see, in background with the Florida population. And that conversation catalyzed a series of different meetings with the different local fire departments or union, our leadership saying there is actually a signal here. There's something where we're seeing some types of cancers a little bit more elevated in this firefighter work group compared to the general Florida population. And really that initial meeting is what started to bring together all the different team members. We consider FCI a community-based participatory project, meaning, normally a scientist is the one that nominates the ideas and says, let's do this. But in this type of setting, it's a little bit different, which makes some scientists uncomfortable, to be honest. But it's the function where like let the community members, right, let the firefighters drive what the questions should be, so that ultimately the firefighters have ownership of it. And that's really what FCI is. It's taking, the questions that the firefighters have, pairing that with the tools of medicine and science that we have through our institution, and then letting them drive where the questions need to be asked so we can reduce cancer burden.
That's great. And it's the stuff you've done in the last decade has been tremendous. I know I could speak as, being a survivor myself, and actually stopping down and visiting the Sylvester Cancer Center when I was going through my stuff. How quickly you were able to get me in and just the level of expertise. It's one of the few places where we can go and they actually understand us as a profession. That is very unique to you guys.
Yeah, I think that starts with our leadership. On the way down, they create a culture where we say, this is a very important group of the population for us. How can we set up change that supports them? And really, who doesn't love a firefighter? Like, you guys come to save us when we're in our most time of needs. The minimum we can do, from a scientific and a clinical perspective, is make sure that we're there to support that structure. And our firefighter cancer initiative is organized in that way where, once a firefighter reaches out, we have a dedicated nurse practitioner that helps navigate that firefighter. It can be so daunting, like just to say, you're traumatized with the idea of like, I just got a diagnosis of cancer. Where do I go? What do I do? Who do I talk to? What do I need? And so having that point of contact first, to help navigate a complex healthcare system is, where we begin, and sort of try to help firefighters navigate themselves through that process so that, they can rehabilitate themselves and get back to work.
It was definitely refreshing because I feel like most of the doctors I've dealt with throughout just my life, I've had to educate them on our job and the hazards and the exposures. And with that, all the ailments that come from that. And that's not something I had to waste a single breath on with you guys. You already knew. So it was easy. It was like, let's just get down to business. Where are we at?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think when you go to like healthcare training, right, like whether you're a doctor or nurse, ancillary professional, they never really make you think a lot about how a person's job can impact their health. And not just their health, but like also their family, right? And I think one of the things we try to do with Sylvester is every year we do lectures to our clinicians, take them to fire stations so they can see what the experience is of a firefighter. Because until you have had just a glimpse and get to see what, a day is, your mind as a clinician changes, and you're like, wow, I never realized you had sleep dysfunction because you're not sleeping as well. You're exposed to all these chemicals in the workplace. You not might not be doing all the cancer screenings that are recommended for it, right? And so I think teaching clinicians how they can be supportive, sensitive, and thoughtful, and when you engage your firefighter, so the burden doesn't have to fall on the firefighter to say like, this is what you got to think about with me when you see me as a patient. I think those are really key things that we try to do through Sylvester.
Yeah, it's been great. And so they have that aspect, but you've been doing all the research. You've been trying to figure out just solutions to all these issues that we have because we are a very unique profession. And no day is ever the same. No exposure is ever the same. One of the things that you recently worked on was just vehicle fires. And not just vehicle fires, but I was used to, I'm old enough to where I just had to worry really about gas. But these electric, these hybrid vehicles, I mean, that's a whole nother, not just putting it out, but also the different toxins that those type of vehicles are putting out. Would you mind kind of going into that study and just some of the results and the craziness that you found from there?
Yeah, happy to share with you. So this again was a firefighter nominated research project. So last July, we were approached by our local firefighter saying, listen, we are increasingly attending to electric vehicle fires. And it makes sense, in society, we're more and more using more renewable energies in everything from our cell phones to, mobile devices, that it makes sense that there's increasing concern about what is in the smoke of an electric vehicle fire. So we teamed up with the Florida State College, our state fire marshal, the Florida Health and Safety Collaborative, who's amazing. They're talented at helping us mobilize these research projects. So I don't want to necessarily call this like a formal project. I've always characterized the electric vehicle as a case study. That's what we did last July. And I call it a case study because we only really had 4 firefighters involved. But it was really neat because it was the first glimpse of us to be able to collect environmental samples as well as biological samples and get like a composite picture of what happens the before, the during, and after that electric vehicle fire. I'll tell you, it's one of the hardest projects I've done. It's as a case, only because there's a lot of moving parts in a short period of time. But the story begins with an electric Nissan Leaf. We had this vehicle donated, and it was placed center stage in the Florida State College in an open area that's safe and distant from uh, uh, other areas around the state college. And the idea would be, could we set it on fire and measure certain biological parameters of the firefighters that were going to be as part of this, fire incident response, and then also collect some environmental samples, like what happens to the air, the water, and the ground around where the electric vehicle happens. So the big hypothesis is, you should see more metals released in electric vehicle fire than compared to a combustion engine. I'm not an engineer, so I can't speak too much to that component. I'm more of a human health person, but we did see a couple of different interesting things. So let's first talk about what did we measure from a biological perspective. So obviously we measured metals. We were interested in seeing are the metals that are present in the firefighter's body higher or lower or different from the before and after. So if you can visualize, this electric vehicle car out in the field, we set up like MacGyver, different cells on the floor using blue painter's tape so that we had like the exact precision of, each cell where the car was sitting, and could more precisely make sure that we're getting samples from the same spot so that when we do the before and afters, we see that there. So for our firefighters, for the metals component, we collected exhale breath. It's a technique you can do where a person can breathe into a very cold tube, and as they're breathing out, the condensation that forms gets trapped in the tube. So you can take their exhaled breath and bring it back to the laboratory and see what metals are present that were going in and out of their lungs during that period of time. So for this electric vehicle fire, the day before it was set on fire, we asked our firefighters to meet us at the college and collected their breath, just so we could see what it looks like at baseline. And then we repeated that same type of collection the morning of, before they set the car on fire, after they set the car on fire, and the next day in the morning to see their breath samples. So that was for breath. We also looked for metals in their blood, and we also looked for metals in their toenails. We just actually finished the last collection of toenails this month in July while we're recording with you, so we can see if the metals that they were exposed to show a peak, during the time period, and then obviously go down as the months go as the months go by. So metals was one of them. We also used this study to look at PFAS exposure. The firefighters had new gear that they were furnished to try, so that we didn't want to use like, existing gear, to make sure there wasn't any previous contamination. So we had brand spanking new gear. And we also looked at PAHs, which for us, the PAHs are a proxy of anything organic that's burning. So I wouldn't expect to see too much differences between a combustion engine and this electric vehicle fire. So that day, the firefighters used some propane, ignited the car. It took a few minutes to get it going, and then followed their normal procedure for extinguishing that fire. It took a little bit more water, and the car ended up reigniting again after we thought it had completely turned off, which posed some interesting other questions about, sort of duration of exposure, like how long you're exposed to the toxins while you're there. So then you're probably curious, what did we learn? What did we find? So we saw actually low lithium, because this is lithium ion batteries, and you're thinking we would see a lot of lithium, but not a lot of lithium present in the human body. But we did see zinc, cobalt, and chromium elevated in the breath of the firefighters, which was very interesting. Once you get off SCBA, even though they're donning and doffing off the gear, the uh, firefighters are still exposed to that immediate, warm zone, and there's still some of that plume that's going there. So we did see metals from the air samples that were present there, that were sort of concerning. But it was a really fascinating study. Like, we're still in the process of sort of writing it up and, formalizing all the data. But I think it'll be our first sort of inkling into like what environmental and biological exposures a firefighter encounters during EV.
Yeah, so I know there's all sorts of different types of carcinogens in a vehicle gas fire, and they're dependent on the stage of the fire. So I have to imagine it's probably going to be the same way for that EV vehicle as well.
Yes, there was in terms of like PAHs, we were able to compare, the before and after, and then we're using our historical data that's been collected through FCI, compare some of those PAHs that we've seen in regular, combustion engine car fires from different training exercises, and they were very similar in terms of the high and low molecular weights that you see there. I think really the concern is what metals are present, and that the concentration of those metals is much higher in those environments. In terms of the human body, some metals are necessary and important, that we normally encounter, but other ones can be very toxic. And some of those metals can are linked to cancer, particularly for like kidney, but and bladder, like cadmium. And so when those are really elevated in the firefighter environment, I get worried because they aerosolize, so those metals are now in much higher concentrations, are everywhere in that environment, so they can land on the skin of the firefighter, or they can breathe in once they're off their SCBA. So I think identifying these pollutants for the firefighters and telling them what they can do to mitigate them, like what is effective? Is a wipe, they're just as effective not only for the pHs but for the metals? We don't know, right? We need that science to help us sort of figure out those.
Do you think that most of their exposure, do you think that it was from absorption or from inhalation when they did take off their SCBA? Or maybe even a combination?
I agree with you 100%. I think it's a combination of inhalation, skin absorption, and even ingestion. Because if you think about it, they're using towels to like try to keep cool and then also drinking water. So you can inadvertently also drink some of the toxins that are there as well. Um, but the primary is usually inhalation. You have your turnout gear, so until you don't complete your doffing procedures, you still have exposure on the skin that we worry about.
And would you recommend us the traditional way of doing gross decon, preliminary exposure reduction, however you want to call it? Like, is what we've been doing, is that still, um, do you think that still is functional for these type of vehicle fires, or do we need to do anything different?
Oh, 100%. I think, it's still true. Soap and water are highly effective, means of reducing many different types of contaminants. And in the context of electric vehicle fires, I still believe that doing, preliminary exposure reduction using standard, soap and water is effective and is a smart decision, right? Because you don't want to carry stuff on you. If you're in the kitchen and you're cooking and you're covered with onions from slicing an onion, you're gonna just go on to, not wash your hands and go to the next one. No, right? Like, you know, do that preliminary reduction because the least amount of time you spend with the air or those toxins on the skin, the better. And as we get more sophisticated with like what is helpful to extract metals so that there's less, I think let the science drive those because I know there's a lot of different products that are sold out there to firefighters, and we really don't know how effective one is over the other. But that preliminary exposure reduction, that soap and water can make a big difference on scene. Even if you can't do soap and water on scene, making sure that you wipe down until you can get to a spot where you can shower within the hour and get everything off of you.
Perfect. And then I got to ask, because I know other people are curious too. Toenails. I didn't, I've never heard of that.
Yeah, I know it's a weird way of like testing, and monitoring someone's exposures, right? Normally you think of like, well, I'll give a blood sample and then you can tell me if I've been exposed or if I have it. Toenails is just another tool we have to think about exposure. We've been using it now for 6 years in FCI to study metal exposures. It's an interesting matrix, right? What can you collect from a human? You can collect saliva, you can collect blood, you can collect hair. So toenails are effective. The way I like to describe them is like the rings of a tree. If you've ever cut a tree and looked at the stump has a bunch of different rings, and the rings tell you the age of the tree. And then within each ring, if it ever experienced like let's say an infection or some hazard, it makes like a little etch mark. So you almost get the history of when things were happening in the environment to a tree. So toenails are the same way. You may ask, why not toenails and fingernails? Well, the reason we prefer toenails over fingernails is because toenails grow slower in humans than fingernails. So if it grows slower, that means you get a longer picture of what that person was exposed to over time. So if you think about the growth of a toenail, it comes from the back of the toe, right? And the nail is being created back there. There are arteries that are feeding the plate where the nail is grown. So whatever's circulating in your blood is feeding it into the nail. And the nail is basically a protein called keratin. So it gets like sort of like jam-packed. So it sort of freezes in time whatever's circulating in your body, right? Kind of like that in Jurassic Park when you see that dinosaur egg and the flies like all, squashed in the material. Um, the same thing is with the toenail. So by the time you get your clippings, that's something that you were exposed to, 3 months ago. So they're great for us because if, firefighter sends us their toenails every 3 months, we can actually get a nice picture of over the year what metals they came across, the concentration and the type.
That's, that is really neat. I had no idea.
Science.
Yes, yes, yes. Whoever had the weird foot fetish.
Exactly. And
I don't know.
figured
Just kidding.
there.
I'm kidding. But no, hey, I love the research that you've done, and I know right now is the environment is really weird as far as what's going to happen with grants and the future of research. What projects are you wanting to still tackle that you haven't got to yet?
Oh gosh, that's such a great question because there's so much that we want to do and be responsive to the request of the fire service that we have to sort of prioritize, right? Taking it one step at a time. For me, what I'm most passionate about is the subgroups of the fire service, and I'll explain why. We have some really amazing scientists here in the US and really around the world that are working a lot on structural firefighting and what we know about health and safety training during around structural firefighting. But as we know, the fire service is made up of many different types of firefighters, and both the way that they attack fire, and they work, to suppress, to do fire incident response. So I think about the fire service as fire inspectors, fire investigators, wildland firefighters, structural firefighting, WUI firefighting, and you have to do research projects in each of their contexts, because that's how it works. And we're in the field of public health, and we always say you practice public health locally. Like, what does that community need? How do they need it? Right. And so you can't just take what's been done with a structural firefighter and apply it to wildland or fire investigation because they're very different about what they do. And so for me, the research projects that I'm trying to focus on is helping sort of the firefighters that have not had attention, given to them over the years by science and medicine. So most recently, we received funding from FEMA to study U.S. fire investigators so that we can better characterize what they have. If you go search for what do we know about the health status of fire investigators, there's nothing. And so we want to be able to say, how can we best provide guidance to them on, just like we've been talking about, like decontamination practices after an EV fire. So what should they do before they go into a fire investigation? What should they do when they, come out of it? It is a very smaller, subgroup of the overall fire service, but they're a mighty group of men and women doing fire investigation. And I think being able to dedicate some of our research work towards some of the subgroups, I think is really key, because we don't want to leave them out. And we some preliminary data showing that they have different types of cancer risks, than the other firefighters, and that's probably due because they spend more time at the fire scene, than a firefighter that's just suppressing it. And so I'm hoping to dedicate some more of that energy in the coming years to help a lot more of the subgroups of the fire service.
I'd love to hear that because that is desperately needed. There's so many of those, and I know each state is different regarding presumptive laws, but many of them don't even include the investigators. And they're, like you said, they're getting exposed to even more stuff than us a lot of times. So any kind of information, any kind of studies is going to help hopefully further that to where they're actually included as well. And like you said, the wildland, that is so foreign to me, but I can't, the way they do things is completely different than how I did things in my career in Dayton, Ohio. It's a world of difference, but you know, um, I look at what I had and I realize how actually blessed I was to be able to go to the station and take a shower and to wash my gear. And I mean, I had all those things at my disposal, and I took them for granted compared to those the WUI individuals.
Yeah, we you're 100% right. And I think hopefully science will inform that. Like, you don't I never until I did ride-alongs with wildland and spent time with them, you don't realize that, hey, they're out 3 weeks in the middle of nowhere and they don't necessarily have a bathroom and uh a place to shower and decontaminate and make sure that their food, where they're eating, is not getting covered with air pollution from the wildland fire smoke that's going everywhere. and that's why I say like the science really has to go towards what that firefighter is doing to help them, with everything, like their workflow. And I think you nailed it, that I think ultimately, hopefully, this science will impact policy, right, to support them, not just with presumption, because that's 110% needed. It's no question in my mind that that you're exposed to toxins at work and that your risk is way elevated compared to the general population. So policy around presumption to me is a no-brainer. Why it takes some other states forever to figure out that, firefighting increase your risk for cancer, I don't know. I wish more states would wake up and, provide at a minimum this protection for our fire service. But there's still a lot of science that needs to get done around other things that we can address in exposure reduction. And another thing that's important to me, too, Jim, is that oftentimes we put the blame and the responsibility on the firefighter, but also the fire department and the union should have some shared responsibility in how we protect the fire service, right? I never always want to say it's the workers' fault, they're not really doing this or that. Like it's really a team effort of how leadership at the fire department and the union can work together to like help that individual firefighter be successful at their job and reduce the carcinogens that they come across, because it's not just chemical, it's also, are you helping them with healthcare access and utilization? Do they have appropriate cancer screening? Do they have appropriate diet and nutrition? um are they getting good sleep hygiene? Here in Florida, we just passed a House bill that's asking fire departments to reevaluate the total number of working hours, to make them 40-hour weeks. And that's a big conversation right now, like how do you organize your department? So I feel like leadership also has an important role in sort of how we address cancer in the fire service.
It's huge. All that stuff is absolutely true, and also just presumptive is also great, but also trying to figure out the appropriate resources and what these individuals need to better do their jobs and to do it safer. Like those are all outcomes of the work that you and your team are doing.
Yeah, I think you're right, because the I've been working with Wildland, our Florida Forestry Service, and part of it is making sure that they have the equipment and the tools that they need, um, and getting them the resources that they need to be successful at what they're doing, not just with prescribed burns, right, which is more common, but even when true wildfire breaks out, that they have those resources, equipment, ancillary support structures to sort of mitigate it. Um, it's hard. There's a lot. That's why when you ask me like where should you direct your science, I'm
Yeah,
like, there's a lot to do, right? Because oftentimes our legislatures, West Coast, will show me the evidence, right, that this is an issue, or that this particular intervention that you're saying works, is functional in the environment. And so it takes time to do science, right? We try to work at firefighter speed sometimes, like electric vehicle fire, grab the data
yeah,
quick. Um, and sometimes it just takes time, because cancer takes forever to develop. So you got to be smart about how you think about measuring cancer risk if it doesn't happen till the tail end of life.
yeah. The 15, 20, 25 year latency period doesn't help. I always tell people like if I fell off a ladder and broke my ankle, it's very obvious the how and when and where I did that, and don't do that again. But we're talking about, being exposed to something and 20 years later it shows up. It's it makes it harder to like, you know, to really get that instilled to try to prevent this stuff because it's if it may happen, it's going to happen years down the road. It's a harder sell to the individuals, and you're already dealing with that Superman complex of it's not going to happen to me. It may happen to Bob, but it's not going to happen to me. I'm good. And that complex is good to some extent because it allows us to do the crazy stuff we do, but it also can hurt us when it comes to prevention and just believing that it's not going to affect me.
Yeah, I've noticed that too when I go to different fire departments, that there's this sort of generational also divide too of like, the fatalistic firefighter who like it's gonna, like you were saying, it's gonna happen to me, I'm gonna get it. And then different generations or different subsectors of the fire department workforce that are saying, no, no, let's try to change it. One study I'm really excited we're launching now in the 11th year is called social network analysis. We teamed up with two really cool behavioral scientists that do a technique where they can tell you how messaging and communication moves vertically and horizontally within a fire department. And it's done through simple surveys, but it gives you the ability to design a social nomogram. So kind of like, circles and spokes coming out of the circle about who talks to who and about what. And so we're going to launch that this year around decontamination practices and cancer screening practices with the fire department so that we can see when release a new training or a new piece of information within it, how does that message move within the ecosystem? Like, are your battalion chiefs, your lieutenant and captains champions of those messages and they're moving them through, or is it actual, workers, or does it get stuck at a station, never moves around outside? So hopefully using some of that science to help us understand where there might be some hampers to getting, communication and safety messages moving through. So that once we get that picture and you get that sociogram, you can then say, listen, these are spokes in the gram where you're not able to move messages out or they're not being adopted by this other subgroup of your fire department because of it. So we're excited because like it'll give us hopefully some new insights. But that's one of the projects I'm definitely looking forward to this year.
That sounds really neat too. 'Cause and it's needed. There's so many times I talk to the department and they may have a policy about something, but just because they have a policy doesn't mean they actually follow it. A lot of times it's just ignored or blown off, or it's used when it's convenient. It's one of those type of policies.
Yep. I was doing the annual cancer survey with a fire department in Alabama that will remain nameless. And we gave everybody the survey, all 800 of the firefighters. And embedded in the survey were some questions about
You're not narrowing it down when you say how many firefighters it is.
well, if you're a firefighter,
I'm,
you probably
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
you
Sorry.
may know, but I'll just say that there was some misunderstanding between resources that were available or not available and policies that were active or not active between, company officers and your entry level firefighters. And it was just so fascinating how stark, like, of course we have this and we do this. And, the general firefighters were like, I've never even heard of that. Do we have that?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, even in my department, we had, I mean, it was two districts per day, three platoons.
Mhm.
So we essentially had six fire departments.
Yep.
That's really how it was, and I'm sure it's that way in a lot of other places.
Yeah.
But but I know you've done all this research, you're going to continue to do this research, but one of the nice things about what you guys do is you also disseminate it. You have an annual conference I've been to, and you can also, if you don't want to, I mean, who doesn't want to come to Miami? But if you're not available, you can always, live stream it as well. Would you mind touching base about your annual symposium?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started, even though FCI is 10 years old, we actually didn't start the Fire Service Cancer Symposium until 2019. And it's a 2-day event that is designed to review the state of the science of what's known. And we use those 2 days to put, a moment in time where we can invite different scientists, clinicians, firefighters from around the country that are doing some really excellent and exciting science to say what is the latest and greatest in cancer control and prevention in the fire service. So we always host it in February because, as you said, Miami's a good time to come down if you're sick of the cold and be with us down in Miami. And the 2-day event is free, so there's no cost at all to attend. And we do also transmit it live, around the world, completely free. You miss out if you're not there in person because there's a sense of camaraderie, people that are networking during breakout sessions. There's a poster session that happens on the first day in the evening where you get to, go face to face with different scientists that are working on topics and pick their brain on what they're doing. There's a wonderful cadre of different vendors that are showcasing different services and educational information about cancer in the fire service. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of work to put together every year. I'm not gonna lie. It's an event. We're scientists, so not event planners, but it really is a team effort when, we take our advisory board, have everybody sort of nominate what topics, which investigators to come through, and then bring everyone those 2 days. We always end up coming up with more ideas, of has anybody looked at, studied this or looked at why, but really a great venue, just to get oriented what's going on and what's the latest thing, and then network with others that are doing some really evidence-based, really nice evidence-based work on certain aspects of cancer in the fire service.
Yeah, it's if you haven't been, you guys should make it a point to go down there because it is enlightening. And like you said, being there live and networking, amazing because you are dealing with the movers and shakers that are actually doing something about this.
100%, yeah. I mean, if you, I don't know if you caught, but we did change it last year to fire service. We used to call it firefighter. And the reason we moved it to fire service was to be inclusive of all these different subgroups we've been talking about, including our volunteer firefighters and wildland and fire inspection, investigators, our military service members. So it has broadened because we want to make it a home for everybody that's interested in the topic of, how do we talk about cancer, and then bring in all the different national players that are involved in that space.
Yeah, absolutely great stuff. I'm going to tell the same thing to you that I've told some other researchers that I like. You're never able to retire. You you're going to have to work forever because the stuff that you're doing is just so impactful to the community. Like we can't let anything happen to you. Even if something
July
happens, we're going to freeze you like Ted Williams.
and clone right.
Yes, there we go.
I don't know
Exactly.
you want two Albertos in the world roaming around, instigating firefighter projects, but um, Jim, it has been a privilege. My personal story was that I was in the field of construction injury prevention, and I was working with construction workers. That's how I studied and trained. To prevent injuries. And then when Dr. Kobitz, she pulled me into that discussion that started, with the healthcare insurance claims and whether or not it really was transformative. And firefighters are such a loving and caring family. It's hard to say no to support the fire service in this. And over these years, even though our primary focus has been cancer, we have been working on many other different spaces with, behavioral health, injury prevention, as we can, and then tie in other, really amazing scientists on the country to help out with these topics, right? Because the only thing in the only issue in the fire service is not just cancer. There's many things, right? Cardiovascular disease and behavioral health and many things that we hear and see in the lay press. And being able to give back is just it's our privilege. It truly is. So I wish we could do more, right? So maybe cloning is the
Well,
way we gotta
even
go,
well, I
but
mean, I've even talked to I've had Dr. Hillary Snap on the show before talking about firefighting hearing loss. Yeah, so like, you guys are really truly working on everything. And
yeah, I mean, yeah, you never think about how work impacts your health, right? Like all the things that you encounter, hazards. I always like to say it's not the negative stuff because there's also a lot of positive stuff you get from work, right? Like, being a firefighter gives you so many different positive things from, family members that you make in your station, in your department, skill sets, training, things that are very unique to the fire service. Um, but if we can reduce a little bit of those hazards, then I think we're doing our job.
absolutely. And you're definitely making the impact. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
I know you are ultra busy, so I'm kind of going to be mindful of your time and get you out of here. If any of our viewers or listeners did have a question, where do they reach out to you at?
They can just shoot me an email. It's acaban at miami.edu. So ACABAN at miami.edu. And if you you know, have a cancer question, like clinical cancer question that we can also help you, our telephone number is 305, like Miami, the area code, 305 243 FIRE. So 243 Fire, that's our dedicated nurse navigator. It doesn't matter where you're at in the country, you can call, and we use our network of NCI cancer centers. So even if you're in Ohio, we connect you with the James Cancer Center there. We've got a rich network of colleagues. So please reach out, let us know how we can help you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, and I'll put all this stuff in the show notes. By chance, do you know the dates for next year's symposium? Is that available yet?
Not just yet, but it traditionally is the third week of February.
Okay.
So you know, mark your third week of February, usually that Thursday and Friday. Um,
You've
that's
got nothing
usually
else going on out there. You might as well go to Miami, right?
exactly. Come visit us and take a break, stretch your legs, go to the beach, and learn a couple of things about firefighter cancer prevention.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you for your time. I'll get you out of here. He's Dr. Alberto Caban Martinez. I'm Jim Bernica. We're out of time, and we'll talk to you next month.